I glance up at the sign over the door. Beauville Historical Society. So, this is my new home now. Guess I'm officially a relic, an old, outdated piece of history. How did I even get to this point? Like, does anyone even use grinding wheels to sharpen things anymore? Honestly, it's been forever since anyone's hands touched me. Before landing here, I spent years forgotten in some dusty old barn, unused, unloved, just sitting there. Then out of nowhere, this tattooed guy with an earring, total stranger, showed up, scooped me up, and tossed me into the back of his pickup like I was nothing. He didn't even try to be gentle about it. He drove me here, dumped me at the front door, and sped off like he couldn't wait to get rid of me. Not gonna lie, that stung. The way he slammed me down and just took off without so much as a goodbye. Rude. His truck, all jacked up with oversized wheels and a muffler louder than it needed to be, disappeared in a cloud of dust. But hey, no point dwelling on it, right? Tears won't help. Plus, I'd probably just rust my metal frame and seed if I started crying. My heavy stone, that's tougher than me. So, I tell myself to chin up. At least here, parked by the front door, there's a chance someone might actually notice me. Maybe they'll admire me, even if I'll never be used again. I take a look around and notice some of the other stuff nearby. My new peers, I guess. First thing that catches my eye is this old horse-drawn plow. It's got this little platform, basically just a square of metal, where the driver would stand while steering the horses. I remember those. My old owner had one just like it, pulled by these massive, powerful horses called Percherons. Man, that was hard, slow work. Those horses were beasts, but they weren't always easy to handle. Still, that plow did an amazing job cutting deep, straight lines in the rocky soil. Next to the plow, there's this super old piano with all these fancy, swirly carvings in its polished mahogany wood. It's kind of weird how this museum just throws random stuff together. Outdoor farm equipment sitting right next to indoor furniture and other odds and ends. The piano still looks pretty classy, but its ivory keys are worn off in spots, and the keyboard reminds me of someone with missing or stained teeth. It probably hasn't been tuned in decades, assuming it can even be played at all. Honestly, it looks like the type of piano that spent years abandoned in someone's basement, maybe with mice nesting inside. Not far from the piano, I spot a spinning wheel with a foot pedal, an ancient gas oven with these skinny, spindly legs, a roll-top desk paired with an inkwell and a feather pen that's seen better days, and a whole bunch of other old, worn-out stuff I can't even begin to name. It's like a chaotic mashup of forgotten eras, all piled together in one strange little museum. Just like the spinning wheel, I've got a wheel too. A thick, heavy stone that spins when someone pumps my foot pedal. When I'm in action, my wheel sharpens things to a fine, deadly edge. The person doing the sharpening has to lean in, pressing the blade or tool firmly against me, and keep at it for a while. It's kind of like riding a weird, old-timey bike. Hard work, takes patience, and you can't rush it. That's where the whole keep your nose to the grindstone thing comes from. Back in my heyday, I sharpened everything. Knives, axes, saws, you name it. But it's been ages since anyone's used me. Honestly, I can't even remember the last time I felt the cold scrape of metal against my stone. I'm over 100 years old now, but let me tell you, I've still got it. I'm solid, sturdy, and ready to sharpen anything that comes my way. Not to brag, but I could go toe-to-toe with any newfangled sharpener out there. Sure, I've got some history, maybe even a few regrets. But who doesn't? Do people even care about what I can do anymore? I wonder what they'll put on my little museum placard. Every item here gets one a quick write-up about its history. I bet mine will be boring. Something like, a grindstone from the early 1900s used to sharpen tools. But people deserve the full story, don't they? I've got tales to tell, real ones, not just the boring facts. I should write my own story, honestly. Maybe it's a bit vain, but I want people to know what I was capable of, and still am. Sharpened tools and weapons can achieve amazing things. Dangerous things. Deadly things. I remember one time, way back when, I sharpened a blade into something razor sharp. That blade went on to do something. Let's just say it wasn't exactly honorable. It's not like I had a choice. I'm just a grindstone, but yeah. I guess you could call me an accessory to the crime. It started with my master, Big John. He earned that nickname because, well, the man was huge. One day, he came to me, muttering under his breath and gripping his favorite knife. For hours, he leaned over me, working that blade against my wheel, keeping his nose to the grindstone, literally. That knife wasn't your typical farmer's tool, though. It wasn't for whittling, cutting rope, or even gutting fish from the creek. No, this knife was different. Long, curved, and dangerous. It stayed tucked in a black leather sheath in the pocket of John's overalls. A weapon, plain and simple. Big John wasn't exactly the calm, collected type. He had a temper, and he believed in always being prepared for trouble. That knife wasn't just a tool for him. It was a statement. Something about the way he sharpened it that day. It felt like he was getting ready for more than just farm work. Big John wasn't just working the farm these days. He was on a mission. Not to settle a score or anything like that, but to find himself a wife. He was convinced the farm needed a woman's touch, and that it was time to start a family. In his old-fashioned way, he dreamed of a sweet, doting wife and a whole bunch of kids running around, helping out on the land he loved so much. So, one Friday night, after a long week in the fields, he cleaned himself up, threw on his best pair of overalls, and headed into town. And, of course, his trusty knife was right there in its usual place in his pocket. Big John already had someone in mind, Sarah, the barmaid at the local tavern. She was the owner's daughter, a bubbly blonde with a bright smile who seemed to light up the whole place. Sarah worked the rowdy bar crowd like it was nothing, balancing trays loaded with heavy beer steins and dodging overly friendly patrons with practiced ease. She wore a low-cut, frilly blouse and a flouncy skirt that swished as she moved, drawing John's eyes. Being the practical farmer he was, John couldn't help but notice her wide hips and think, now there's a woman built for raising a family. Sarah had a way of brushing off the drunk, grabby men who tried their luck with her. But that night, one guy, a stuffy banker with a greasy comb-over, just wouldn't take no for an answer. She slammed his beer down on the table harder than usual and turned to leave, knowing he'd probably try something. And sure enough, before she could get away, he grabbed her around the waist. "Stop, sir. I need to get back to work," she said, forcing a tight, polite smile even though her voice carried a sharp edge. "What's the rush, sweetheart?" the banker slurred, his whiskey breath practically choking her as he held on tighter. Sarah tried to pull away, but his grip was like a vice. surprisingly strong for a guy who probably hadn't done a day of manual labor in his life. That's when Big John, sitting just one table over, felt his blood start to boil. Fury surged through him as he stood up, his big frame towering over the crowd. He stomped over, his boots thudding against the wooden floor. "I believe the lady told you to take your hands off her," John said, his deep voice trembling with barely contained anger. He spat out the word "sir" like it left a bad taste in his mouth. Truthfully, he didn't think the man deserved to be called a gentleman at all. But Big John's mama had raised him right, and even in moments like this, his manners refused to let him completely lose his cool. "What are you gonna do about it, farm boy?" the banker sneered, his words dripping with arrogance. Sarah wriggled in his grip, trying desperately to break free. Big John's patience snapped. His face flushed as he growled, "Who you calling a boy?" "You, obviously," the banker replied, his voice smooth and taunting. "I'm no boy," John shot back, his tone low and dangerous. Without warning, John reached into his pocket and whipped out his knife, the blade gleaming as he pointed it straight at the man. The banker's cocky smirk faltered as he let go of Sarah, backing off just a little. "Whoa, big guy, no need to get crazy. Put that thing away," he said, holding up his hands in mock surrender. But John didn't budge. He kept the knife in his hand, his eyes locked on the man who dared to disrespect Sarah. Then, out of nowhere, the banker's hand flew like a snake striking, and he slapped the knife right out of John's grip. It hit the floor with a metallic clatter, silencing the bar as everyone stopped to watch. The air was thick with tension, the kind that made you hold your breath. Both men lunged for the knife at the same time, but the banker, quick and wiry despite his soft appearance, grabbed it first. He straightened up, holding the blade high like he'd just won a prize, the candlelight bouncing off its razor-sharp edge. "Give me that back," John roared, his voice booming across the room. "Over my dead body," the banker screamed, clutching the knife like it was his lifeline. The struggle that followed was chaotic and vicious, John's sheer strength clashing with the banker's frantic energy. They grappled, twisted, and pushed, neither man willing to let go. Then, in one final, desperate motion, the banker drove the knife forward with everything he had. The blade sank deep into John's chest, the handle sticking out as his massive frame froze in shock. A sickening gurgle escaped his lips, and he crumpled to the floor like a felled tree. Blood spread quickly beneath him, dark and heavy against the wooden planks. And just like that, Big John was gone. Yeah, you heard me right. He died. I hate that my work, my sharp edge, played a part in it. When I first heard what happened, I felt sick. I even cried a little. Someone had to wipe me down with an old rag, thinking the barn roof was leaking. Lucky for me, I didn't rust. But the guilt? That stayed. Big John was a good man, and he didn't deserve to go out like that. He was just trying to stand up for Sarah, his lady love. If only the knife hadn't been so sharp, maybe he would have had a chance. But no, he bled out there on the tavern floor, like some poor animal. They buried him down by the creek on his farm, the land he loved so much. The land he dreamed of passing on to the family he never got to have. Sarah showed up at the funeral, tears streaming down her face. the kids they might have had together, they never came to be. As for the knife, who knows what happened to it? Nobody ever found it, but I'm sure it's still out there somewhere, sharp as ever. And me? I can't shake the guilt. It cuts deep, like that blade. I was built to do my job, and I did it well. Too well.